Dragon Age 2 is a masterpiece. Now, hear me out. In general, I love role-playing games. I also love the genre of games that we call RPGs, which allegedly stands for role-playing games, but something seems to have gotten lost over the years. Actually, that isn't really accurate. Nothing was lost, because the essence of the role-playing experience could never really be found in video games anyway. Today, RPG seems to mean a game that has experience levels, hit points, stats, equipment that increases those stats, some kind of magic system, and some kind of skill system. But these are just the mechanics of how battles work in RPGs. An RPG doesn't really need those features, and having these features isn't really enough to make a game an RPG. So today we're going to dive into my favorite genre of video games, and we're going to get into why I think developers are missing the mark and have twisted the meaning of RPG so that it contains very little, if any, actual role-playing. An RPG is a role-playing game. Duh, right? That doesn't really tell us much, though, because it doesn't really explain what it means to play a role. And it would essentially include every single game that has a protagonist. For example, in Super Mario Bros., the player plays the role of Mario rescuing Princess Peach or Toadstool or whatever the hell she's called now. But does that make Super Mario Bros. An RPG? In Final Fantasy VII, players take up the role of multiple characters, including Cloud and Tifa. But does playing these roles make Final Fantasy VII an RPG? Many people point to the gameplay mechanics that I mentioned a moment ago, experience level, strength, agility, stamina stats, as the essence of what makes a game an RPG. But the wonderful Batman Arkham games have experience levels, new skills to be unlocked, and a pretty strong sense of progression as the game goes on. Arkham Asylum is very heavily story-driven, and notably, one plays the role of Batman going through Arkham Asylum, Arkham Prison, or Gotham, but it's pretty clear that the Batman games are not role-playing games. What about Skyrim? Skyrim has experience levels, hit points, ability scores, equipment, enchantments, alchemy, and a single dedicated protagonist through which the player interacts with the game world. There's a quest system that I absolutely despise and have talked about before, and Skyrim invented the compass at the top of the screen thing that has invaded every genre of games, from RoboCop to the aforementioned Batman games. But it has dragons, and it's set in a fantasy world, and it has all of the gameplay mechanics known to be common in RPGs. But what role does the player play? The Dragonborn, of course, but is this actually role-playing, or is it merely interacting with the game world via a protagonist, in the same way that Mario interacts with the game world in Super Mario Bros.? I would argue that a role-playing game allows the player to create a personality for the protagonist, or even multiple protagonists, and then interact with the game world through the lens of that personality, while the game world and its inhabitants react accordingly. I would say that it has nothing to do with experience levels, a fantasy setting, equipment, quests, and the like. Those are merely how the player interacts with the game world and its inhabitants. I've been playing video games for basically 35 years, and I can only think of one example that meets the criteria of a role-playing game that I've outlined. Dragon Age 2. If you look at my page on OpenCritic from when I used to review games, you'll find a game in my top 3 that probably no other reviewer has ever listed. And that game is Dragon Age 2. I don't think that Dragon Age 2 is a perfect game, not by any means. In fact, it's pretty flawed. Recycled environments abound, and the combat system is a noticeable downgrade from Dragon Age Origins. I'm also not a huge fan of fighting enemies in waves where they just kind of appear on the battlefield after the previous wave is defeated. It's kind of dragged out and it kind of sucks. But Dragon Age 2, unlike any other game out there, allows the player to physically craft a protagonist to their relative liking. It isn't the most robust character creator out there, although it can be improved with mods. Notice that I specified that the player can physically craft a protagonist, but that doesn't really distinguish Dragon Age 2 from anything else. Lots of games have character creators, even the Dark Souls games, where there's virtually no non-combat interaction with NPCs. Tangentially, I would put forward that just about every game should have a character creator at this point, allowing the player to generate a character with whom they can relate. While there are obviously some games where the character canonically has a specific gender and appearance, I don't think that it would actually do any harm to the story or gameplay of Batman Arkham City to allow the player to create a female Batman. Yes, it would run counter to the Batman lore, but these are video games. They have the unique feature of putting the player directly in the character's shoes to modify the story and its details by playing the game. The player determines the manner in which Mr. Freeze is finally taken down, and the player determines the order that the Mad Hatter, Bane, and the Penguin are defeated. Nothing whatsoever would be lost by the addition of a character creator, and the default could still remain Bruce Wayne. But that's really a topic for another day. Dragon Age 2 lets players go beyond simply determining how Hawk will look. Dialogue abounds in the game, and players almost always have at least 3 responses to choose from with Hawk: diplomatic, humorous, and aggressive. These dialogue options can affect story development with quests, and can open up new quests or abruptly end them. Furthermore, not everything Hawk says is determined by player choice. Players who consistently choose one of the options will find that Hawk themselves starts to respond in line with that developed personality, and that NPCs react to the personality that has been developed for Hawk. A person is a combination of their appearance and their personality, and this is true of video game characters as well. Modern games, and classic games too, though classic games can be forgiven because this technology would have been well beyond the NES port of Ultima Exodus, they completely ignore the personality part, and essentially strip characters down to a physical appearance and a set of combat stats. It's much easier to program a robust combat system, experience levels, and stat-boosting equipment than it is to program large, winding dialogue trees. But other games have done this to great success. Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic is one example, as it allows the player to roleplay as a Jedi or a Sith, with both dialogue choices and gameplay actions determining the direction that the story goes. This opens up different abilities to the player and different paths for the story to go. So these things aren't unheard of in video games. They're just very uncommon. As usual, it's because developers are focusing on the wrong thing, the easier thing. Just as it is much easier to put an icon on a map than it is to design a world with sufficient landmarks that the player can be guided to a destination with directions rather than the UI, it's much easier to simply write an unchanging story than to write one that adapts itself to the player. But do you really feel like you're role-playing as former soldier turned eco-terrorist when you play Final Fantasy VII? Do you really feel any additional connection to the characters than you do to the characters in a movie? This is an important distinction because having gone through Dragon Age 2, I can say that Hawk is easily my favorite protagonist of all time. Over the course of the game, watching Hawk grow and become known with a developed personality and skill set left me with a fondness for and closeness with Hawk that I don't have for Cloud, Squall, or Verso. After playing countless games where the character is the chosen one, chosen by God or Fal'Cie or fate or whatever, with unique abilities that allow them to stand up to the big bad and save the world from the destruction wrought by the big bad's questionable and unexplained motives, Dragon Age 2 dared to be different. I have to quickly point out that I'm going to refer to a very specific Hawk going forward, my Hawk. My Hawk is a sarcastic, dual-wielding rogue who uses sarcasm as a coping mechanism to deal with the chaos and death around her. She loves her mother and her sister and is deeply loyal to those in her life, because she has seen so much death. It would naturally follow that such a person would fight tooth and nail to keep people who matter to her in her life. So when Isabel makes some bad decisions, Hawk would turn the world upside down to help her friend, and incidentally, her lover. But Hawk is just a refugee. There's nothing special about her. She's just some chick who uses daggers and is trained in combat. It's never brought up when and where she receives this combat training, but that's pretty common for RPGs and fantasy in general. Developers seem to think that everyone in the Middle Ages knew how to use swords and bows, but whatever, it's not a super important detail. We can easily assume that she received training as a child in Ferelden. The Blight is occurring, which is from Dragon Age origins. Monsters called Darkspawn are ravaging the land, destroying villages and towns, and the Hawk family is caught up in this disaster. So they flee through the countryside to the city of Kirkwall. They arrive at Kirkwall with basically nothing except the clothes on their back and the weapons in their hands. After all, they are refugees. It doesn't take long for Hawk to learn about an expedition that can make her a lot of money and solve all of her family's problems. You see, Hawk has an uncle in Kirkwall who should be wealthy and able to help out his refugee family. But it turns out he's kind of a piece of crap and the family has nothing. So Hawk must go through Kirkwall and surrounding areas doing odd jobs for people in order to earn the money necessary to pay her way onto this expedition. It's an investment in the future for the most part, as they are looking for some dwarven ruins or something where there will be a lot of valuable stuff. I don't remember all of the specifics. It's been many years since I played it, although I did recently start a new playthrough. A lot of stuff happens during the expedition, but it's mostly successful. The Hawk family's money problems are essentially solved, but Hawk doesn't stop being Hawk. For one reason or another, I honestly forget what the Act 2 motivation is. There's an underlying motivation throughout Act 1 that is earning the money for this expedition, and Act 2 has a motivation as well that just sort of runs through the entire act, but I don't recall what it was. Anyway, Hawk must go through Kirkwall and its surrounding areas again, helping people. Rather than being for money, this is because the various people Hawk knows and remembers from her time as a poverty-stricken refugee request her help. A lot of these quests weave together and affect each other even though areas are repeated and the combat is tedious. Standard for BioWare at the time and most RPGs these days, extensively discussing things with other party members leads to additional dialogue and quests, and all of these quests drive the story forward in some way. Or they at least provide context that push Hawk toward one direction or the other. In Act 3, the story climaxes in one of the most powerful stories I've ever experienced in a video game. And it's no exaggeration to say that I was on the edge of my seat throughout the entire act. I reached and finished Act 3 in the same night because it was that compelling, it was that intense, it was that amazing. Avoiding spoilers for this spectacular story, Hawk finds herself at a point of no turning back. And in that moment, it isn't at all clear what could have been done differently. What led to this? There was never really any overt sign that it would go this far. One little thing led to another, and at each interval, Hawk was only trying to survive and do what she thought was best. Hawk isn't a chosen one. She has no divine destiny, and the gods seem to have forsaken the world rather than choosing her to save it. Hawk isn't trying to make the world a better place, and definitely isn't trying to save the world or shake its foundations. Hawk is just an ordinary person, albeit a very skilled fighter, and is just trying to survive and protect the people she cares about. Fans hated this. So BioWare came back and said, "Oh yeah? You want to be another chosen one, saving another fantasy world from another big bad with questionable motives? Well, guess what, bitch? Now you're the f***ing Herald of Andraste." The Inquisitor of Dragon Age Inquisition is not a character anyone can relate to. The Inquisitor isn't even really a character. I'm not a chosen one. You're not a chosen one. I don't have a glowing thing in my hand that makes me unique and unlike anyone else in the entire universe. I'm Hawk, you know? I'm just some person trying to get by and trying to do what I think is best. I'm not leading an army, I'm not rising up to face the devil, and I'm not Dragon Age Jesus. It's important when dealing with fiction to be able to see parts of yourself in the characters. And this is especially true for video games and infinitely more so for role-playing games. If you can't connect with the protagonist of a role-playing game, then you have nothing. You have a generic fantasy plot with generic fantasy characters. It's the same kind of thing that came to make R.A. Salvatore's Drizzt unrelatable, and that made Margaret Weis and Tracy Hickman's Raceland ultimately unrelatable. When you elevate characters to such unattainable statuses, you put them beyond the reach of the people they're supposed to touch. And this is why Dragon Age Inquisition is so disappointing. This is the reason that Veilguard was so disappointing. None of the other things would have mattered if the protagonist was likable and relatable. Although, to be fair, I haven't played Velgard, and I suspect, like Dragon Age 2, it has a lot of other problems. But let's be real. The many issues of Dragon Age Inquisition wouldn't matter if Hawke was the protagonist, and if Inquisition had the robust ways to express Hawke's personality like Dragon Age 2 did. No one wants to watch a movie with an awful main character. If the main character is flat, dull, and uninteresting, no one is going to sit through the movie to find out if it has an amazing plot. Why did we forget this when it comes to video games, where the charisma of the main character is so much more important? Because the character is a proxy for the player themselves to interact with the world. Not only could I not really determine a personality for my Inquisitor, but the one on display by BioWare didn't really seem to have a personality at all. People dislike Final Fantasy VIII for many reasons, but I would contend that the biggest issue people have with it, even if they don't realize it, is that Squall f***ing sucks. He's the dark, brooding emo kid in the corner who has no friends. And it should go without saying that this is an awful choice for a protagonist. Now, to be completely fair, Red Mage and Warrior from Final Fantasy I didn't have much personality either, but that's an NES game. It's from an era where games simply couldn't handle much of a disposition from protagonists. So NES games relied entirely on gameplay and what story they could squeeze out of 8 bits and 128 kilobytes. It wasn't until the SNES era that we started seeing characters with actual personalities. Shadow, the forerunner to Squall, Locke, the thief with a heart of gold and a lost love, Celeste, the traitor, unsure of herself. It's no coincidence that it was Super Mario RPG Legend of the Seven Stars that gave Bowser his goofy bad guy personality. Previously, it just hadn't been possible. But it's possible now. And as Dragon Age 2 shows, if you embrace it, it creates a rewarding experience unlike any other. It's a character that you made, physically and mentally. Hawke is what you make him or her to be. And you can connect with that, no matter who you are. This is why Dragon Age 2 is a masterpiece of role-playing. True, it's a pretty flawed game, recycled environments, tedious combat that drags on much too long, and pretty much every other complaint I've ever seen leveled against it is valid. These issues all exist, and I wish Dragon Age 2 didn't have these issues, and I wish Dragon Age Inquisition hadn't fixed all of those problems by gutting the protagonist. Because you can connect with Hawke in a way that's rare. And when you connect with the main character, then you can connect with the game world and everyone in it. The main character is your avatar, your conduit to experience the world that has been created. Look at Kingdoms of Amalur Reckoning. What the hell personality traits does your Kingdoms of Amalur character have? What about your Dragonborn? Is your Dragonborn charming but standoffish? Is your Dragonborn sarcastic and snide? Is your Dragonborn maybe an arrogant dick because they know they're better than everyone else? Actually, for that matter, can you name even one personality trait that your Dragonborn has? By all means, I'll wait while you think about it. Why are we putting up with this? What about Link, the legendary hero of time? So named because Miyamoto wanted him to be the link between the player and the game world. What the hell happened to that? Link isn't a blank slate for the player to create a personality for. The tools don't exist to create that personality. The gameplay just isn't there. If Link is a blank slate, Nintendo forgot to give you writing utensils for it. And this is the case over and over throughout gaming. Developers love throwing this excuse out there of having a blank slate for you to give a personality to, but they never ever give you the tools to craft that personality. Link isn't a blank slate. He's just blank. He's a featureless protagonist. You can't connect with him as a character because there's nothing to connect with. And I'm not demanding that every game give us the tools and dialogue options and changing conversations to allow us to craft a character's personality. But role-playing games, where the entire point is to play a role, it's inexcusable that they don't. It is inexcusable that they offer nothing but stat points and talent trees. And for those games that aren't role-playing games, that just want to create a protagonist for you to connect with, well, they had damned well better give the character at least a personality for you to connect with. Because I've personally never found a block of gray clay to be particularly relatable. This has been Getting Played, reminding you that you deserve better. You deserve interesting protagonists. You deserve to be able to roleplay in your role-playing games. You're paying a lot of money for these things, and the people making them should do better. Demand better. Demand actual characters, not featureless blobs. Demand the ability to roleplay in your role-playing games.
Look, I am very sorry. It's just that Golgra told us that's the password, and
Come on, it's a gestural. He'll have forgotten in about a minute.
I'm sorry.